So now that we are done creating the configuration file for our database resources, we need to create a class that will make use of this configuration. To create the class, we will have to go to the com.xyneex.sales.database package that we just created, and then we're going to right click on it, and then we're going to select new Java class. I like to call this class resource manager because the way I see it is going to manage our database resources. Alright, so I'm going to click on finish, and here we go. We have the public class resource manager. Alright, so what is this class going to do? The first thing this class is going to do is to set the database properties. Okay, and we actually have a class in the Java API documentation. Let me bring up the Java API documentation. Under java.util, there is a class called properties, and this public class properties extends hash table and has the generic types of object and object as the key and object as the value. The properties class represents a persistent set of properties. The properties can be saved to a stream or loaded from a stream. Each key and its corresponding value in the property list is a string. The property list can contain another property list as is default. This second property list is searched if the property key is not found in the original property list. Because properties inherit from hash table, the put and put all methods can be applied to a properties object. Their use is strongly discouraged as they allow the caller to insert entries whose keys or values are not strings. The set property method should be used instead. If the store or save method is called on a compromised property object that contains a non-string key or value, the call will fail. Similarly, the call to the property names or list method will fail if it is called on a compromised properties object that contains a non-string key. Alright, so enough of all these jargons. What they are saying over here is that these public class properties can be used to load properties from a stream and save inside an instance of this class, and those properties that we created, this properties file over here. What I mean by these properties here we just created, you can recall, these are the properties and these are the values. They can be saved in an instance of this properties class. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to use this properties class in the resource manager class I just created over here. Alright, so what we're going to do is that we're going to create a field which is going to be private properties. Let's call this db properties. Put that semicolon. Then I'm going to import properties from java.util.properties, and then we have a properties field over here. Next thing I would like to do is to create a constructor for the resource manager. This constructor will initialize this properties field that we've just created here. The constructor has to be public so that it can be accessible. So call public resource manager, and here is the constructor. So what we're gonna do in the constructor, before I start writing code in the constructor, I like to create a method that I would like to invoke in the constructor. So the name of this method is gonna be, I want this method to be private. I want it to be accessible outside this class. So I'll call it set db properties. I want this method to be called within the constructor so that it will actually initialize and set the properties from the properties file. Now recall, this is the properties file, configuration.properties. And the properties file configuration of properties is in the same package with the resource manager inside the com.xyneex.sales.database package. So we should be able to read this properties file as an input stream into this properties object. But first we need to create an input stream. So I'm gonna type input stream. Let's call this db prop input stream, because this is a database property input stream, so I'm just gonna call it db prop input stream. Then it's gonna be equal to resource manager dot class dot get resource as stream. Alright, let me explain this resource manager dot class dot get resource as stream. If you wish to get the class instance of this class resource manager, you need to invoke the resource manager dot class. As a matter of fact, if you need to get the class instance of any class, you need to call the name of the class dot class. The dot class keyword is actually used in getting the class instance of any class. And when I mean class instance of any class, what I mean is that let's go over to java.lang. The java.lang package, we have a class called class. You can see instances of the class represent classes and interfaces in a running Java application. And a enum is a kind of class, and an annotation is a kind of interface. Every array also belongs to a class that is reflected as a class object that is shared by all arrays with the same element type and number of dimensions. The repetitive Java types boolean, byte, char, short, int, long, float, and double, and the keyword void are also represented as class objects. Class has no public constructor. Instead, class objects are constructed automatically by the Java virtual machine as classes are loaded and by calls to the defined class method in the class loader. The following example uses a class object to print the class name of an object. Void print class name object obj. Using the out of print class, the class of obj is object.getClass.getName. It is also possible to get the class object for a name type or for void using a class literal. And what they mean by the class literal is the dot class literal that I just explained over here. So if you can check section 15.8.2 of the Java language specification. For example, using the out of print line, the name of the class foo is foo.class.getName, where foo is actually a class that was created. Okay, I know you may not understand these documentations when you read them, but what in essence is what they are saying is that if you need to get a class instance of the particular class you are working with, you call the class literal, which is whatever class name the class. Alright, let's not waste too much time on this. You're supposed to follow instructions, so go ahead and do exactly what I'm doing. Resource manager.class.get resource as stream. Resource manager.class will give me an instance. Give me an instance of give me an instance of this class called class. Okay, and that the instance of that class represents the classes and interface that is running, so it will represent my resource manager class, and I should be able to get resource as stream. There's a method called get resource as stream. Here, let's check for it. Okay, here it is. So you can see get resource as stream returns an input stream. This get resource as stream requires a string as the argument, and it finds a resource with a given name. So what resource are we looking for? In here we are supposed to look for the configuration of the properties file. That's gonna be the resource, and that's you can recall that's why I call this class resource manager, because it manages the resources, and the resource is this configuration of the properties file.
It's
So
12 o'clock a.m.
Oops. So this we're gonna pass in to the argument of this get resource as stream method configuration. Make sure you spell it very well, spell it correctly, because configuration is the name of this file, and ensure that you put the dot properties file name extension. So get resource as stream. Let's go back to the API documentation. Get resource as stream is supposed to return an input stream. So you can see that's why we had to declare an input stream, and I have to import java.io.input stream. Okay. Now when we're done with that, the next thing we need to do is to instantiate this properties object, because it was simply declared here. As you can see, NetBeans is giving us a warning that field DB property is not used, so we have to instantiate it. So I can say this dot DB properties equals new properties. So that's the instantiation of the properties object here. And the next thing we need to do is to load the properties that we got from the input stream into the properties object. So to do that, we're gonna say this dot db properties dot load, and the load method requires an input stream. Okay. So this method is gonna throw an IO exception. So you can declare this method to throw an java.io exception. The reason why it may throw an exception is because the process of trying to load information from an input stream, any error may occur. Maybe the file is corrupt or something like that. So we need to handle IO exception, and I don't want to handle it in this method. I want to throw it out so that the application should be able to handle it properly, and I should be able to see what actually caused the exception. So this exception will bubble up to whoever is gonna call this setDB properties method. Alright, the next thing I'll like to write is another method that will enable us to create user system directories. But this video is actually going for long now, so I'm gonna cut this. So in the next video, I'm gonna write the method that will create the user systems directories. So I hope you found this informative, and thanks for viewing.